Hello, welcome back to Art Fart. I promise I will get to art eventually because I'm also an art teacher, but for now I'm talking about English, and I'm talking about writing short answer responses for college. So if you find yourself in a situation where you are applying for college and they require you to write various short answer responses, I have some tips for you. Alright, so my first tip for you is do not philosophize. I hope I said that right. Yes, I promise I'm an English teacher. So one thing that I see students do oftentimes is when they start writing their short answer response, they'll say something like, discomfort and pain are necessary to improve any aspect of one's life. Okay, so what I want you to keep in mind is this isn't an Oprah talk show, and the audience that you are writing to, they are college educated, and they don't need to be philosophized to. So you want to avoid these little nuggets of wisdom. If anything, colleges really appreciate when you humble yourself, when you admit that you don't know everything. That's more of a plus, especially since most kids, applying for college are, only 18. So there's a lot more life to be had after 18 and a lot more knowledge to gain. So you want to be open and honest and avoid, making generalizations about life or philosophizing in general. All right, so that is my first tip. My second tip has to do with picking the theme or the topic of your writing. So sometimes these short answers are very specific. They will ask you things like, how do you see yourself fitting into this college campus? What are some examples of leadership roles that you've taken on, things like that. So when they're very specific, it makes writing the short answer a lot easier. However, some of the topics are not specific at all, and they are sort of open-ended questions, and when they are open-ended questions, I see my students struggle more because you really have to narrow down and find your focus. So I had a student that had a topic and it just wasn't the strongest topic. So if you write something and you read over it, you have to ask yourself, am I really showing myself to this college? Are they getting a glimpse into who I am, into my interests and my goals for the future? And if the answer is no, then you need to pick another topic. So my advice is to sit down and do some brainstorming. I like to draw the little clouds, have a literal brainstorm. If it's raining outside, that's even a bigger plus. I have terrible jokes for days. Anyway, so sit down and come up with some ideas. You want to be very specific. So like I said, you want to avoid general things like struggle is critical in life. That's not good. You don't want that. You want to be very specific. So even with your topic, you want to be specific. You want to pick a moment where you succeeded at something, or maybe pick a moment where you didn't succeed at something, but you learned a really important lesson. So it is okay to talk about learning these important lessons when it comes to yourself. You just don't want to get all, universal and go off on a philosophical rant. Another tip to keep in mind that I tell my students often is be careful whenever you're talking about yourself. You do not want to paint yourself in a negative light. I understand that this writing process is really nerve-wracking for a lot of students, and self-depreciating jokes are one way that people handle this stress. But you don't want to say things like, I'm not a natural athlete, or I'm not the smartest kid in the class, or whatever. You want to focus on your strengths. You want to highlight your strengths. And of course, my last tip is just to read some examples of some successful short answers. You don't want to go off on a tangent. You want to keep it short and sweet and to the point. But it needs to be eloquently written. You need to write it well. You need to make sure it's grammatically correct, that you use some adequate vocabulary. You don't want to take it to the extreme where you have all these giant words and you're trying to make yourself look more well-read. they can tell when you're trying too hard. So you want to just maintain a consistent voice throughout your short answer. And especially make sure that your short answer flows well. I had one student that started off their short answer by talking about being an athlete, and they ended it by talking about academics. And you can do that. You just need to find a smooth transition. But it is really hard to transition between ideas because you're in one paragraph. You only have so many words, and transitioning between ideas is a risky thing to do in a short answer, especially when your ideas are really far apart. You know, you can't start off by talking about sort of one topic and end up talking about another because you're in the same paragraph. So just keep that in mind when you're writing. And of course, you know, when you're finished, check over it and make sure it looks good. And I would also suggest, you know, having a friend or a mentor read over it. You can have a tutoring company read over it. I'm a tutor. I read over a ton of these, and that's why I make these videos. So hopefully it can help some people out there who maybe can't afford tutoring, or, you know, who just need some extra advice, extra help. So get out there and write something awesome.